Why do we choose others based on the outside looks versus the inside substance? Today I'm going to show you that the Lord rejects those based simply on appearance, because God sees not as man sees, but He's not looking at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Let's get started. Welcome to Reason for Truth, everybody. I'm your host, Stevie Garofalo. Reason for Truth, you know where the truth comes first, reasons come last, but we're always and constantly learning, because when we stop learning, we stop teaching, or at least stop teaching well, and here we like to teach well. Listen, in the past, U.S. presidential election races, they can be aggravating for everybody. A friend of mine who works for a large Christian ministry, we were talking some years ago, said to me at some point that, hey, she said she didn't like the presidential frontrunner. I won't tell you who it is. You probably figured it out. But when I asked her why and who she would prefer, she said that she liked Mitt Romney. Now, not here to pick on Mitt Romney. That's what she said. When I pointed out that, I said, listen, you're a Christian. Mitt Romney's a Mormon. I'm not saying you wouldn't. If he was a front runner, would I vote for him? I think that's a whole different discussion. But yeah, if he was a better candidate than the other, but he was against another candidate who wasn't a Mormon. So I asked her that question, would you support somebody else who was more closely aligned with Christian values? When I asked her why she liked Mitt Romney, she said, well, he carried himself well. He simply was like a statesman. She says, I just like him. That's what she said. I was quick to point out that it seemed that she liked him due to the fact that he was, on the outside, a distinguished, good-looking leader, visibly speaking, great speaker, has a charisma. I wouldn't say he's that charismatic. He's kind of a boring guy, but he holds himself very statesman-like. And on the outside, he just looked really kind of like King Saul, right? Good-looking, head, shoulders, head above everybody else, and how he presented himself. But here, the Lord really prefers leaders based on the inside, not the outside appearance. And I pushed back on her, on her position there, that we as Christians have to think differently. And I said, listen, Romney, what's his track record? He was once a governor, as a I guess, I don't know what you'd say, conservative or liberal, but he was over the state of Massachusetts, which church, speaking of churches, was once the most churched and solid state in the Union. Now, speaking of churches, is the most liberal churched state in the whole Union. So I said, you got to take that into account. That's who he's governing. I also pointed out to her that I would rather have a non-Christian leader rather than a Mormon, if their Christian values were more aligned with biblical truth, and they would stand up for Christian values. I'm not going to get too deeply into this, but she was kind of silent on the matter, and I pointed out 1 Samuel 16:7, which says, but the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. Christians are called to choose a spouse, friend, neighbors. Well, you can't really pick your neighbors. That you kind of get stuck with. But certainly our political leaders, based on the inside, not the outside. But how often do we choose people based on person's good looking, the person's charismatic? There's nothing wrong to start there. You just don't want to finish there. Most of us, when looking for a spouse to marry, we take into consideration the physical attributes and the beauty of the other person. And there's nothing wrong with that until our desire to get serious with that person goes more in the direction where the good looks or the charismatic personality, those are important things. But when they, in and of themselves, overshadow what's on the inside as less important, then we've made an error. Then we start to create problems for ourselves. Proverbs 31:30 tells us that. It says, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. I think you could apply that to both men and women in this case. Proverbs 31:10-31, in an acrostic poem, gives God's template and description of the worthy woman who's exalting the honor and dignity of women. I'd assert that the same could be said again of men. It is speaking of women, but I think in application it can be applied to all human beings. I don't see why not. Christians are not exempt or immune from choosing others, albeit friends, spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, political leader. Listen, any choice that you have, and sadly, even in the church today, pastors are chosen by their congregation based on what we see on the outside sometimes, and in many churches, I would say, trumps what's on the inside. Unless people want a rotten inside, we see more and more non-biblical churches popping up for that reason. But as Christians, we are called to be discerning and to choose others who will affect our lives based on deep thought and biblical values and our interactions with them. So in the end, choosing anybody, a friend, husband, wife, political leader, and certainly a pastor, should not be based on how one looks, how they sound, or how they kind of excites us when we talk to them, but what they believe based on biblical scripture, how deeply they think through. Do they have depth in what they say, conviction and on their principles, and then make sure their principles are right, because if they have conviction on the wrong principles, that's even worse. So listen, we are human. We don't always get it right, and at first glance, physical attributes can be very deceiving for what's on the inside. Sometimes they match up, sometimes they don't. Good looks and attractive personality are important, but those things, if not matched up with biblical conviction, will distract and mislead us in the end. Now, what's most concerning to me today is that Christians who are Christians in name only, kind of like I would say cultural Christians, sadly, even in the church and in Christian ministry world sometimes, and certainly in many religions, we find leaders chosen, they're followed by just for their charisma, their good looks, their friendliness. They're very charismatic and exciting to be around, and not their substance, not what's on the inside, because a lot of times they don't even get to see what's on the inside, only what's on the outside. And that's very dangerous. And for us as believers in Jesus Christ, we need to look what's on the inside, match it up with Scripture, and make rightful, smart, wise, discerning decisions as to who are our friends, even at many times the workplace if we have a choice, certainly who we marry, who's our pastor, what's the church. All right? In conclusion, when they came, he looked on Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed is before him. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on his height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. 1 Samuel 16, 6-7. Let's remember that the Lord, more often than not, rejects those based on, who are based or just on their appearance. That's their strongest attribute, because God sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. The appearance and stature of Jesse's oldest son, Eliam, commended him to leadership. But these were the very things that had commended Saul. Chapter 9, verse 2. Instead of looking at the appearance, God searches the heart. While way too many people today choose their friends, spouses, even their political leaders, and sadly their church based on personality, charisma, and all that good stuff, we need to think differently. The state of a man or a woman's heart is far more significant than one's natural abilities, their physical appearance, how much money they have, or even how much power they have. So let's choose starting today to look more deeply into the substance of a person rather than their outer shell, and choose others based not only on their ability, but also on their character and their conviction regarding God's ways. And that's all I'm going to say on the matter. But this is a hot potato. I'll probably get some comments. You can put them down below if you like. Hey, make sure before you go, subscribe to this channel. Boom! Gazio Sinistra Italian right hook. Then hit that alert bell. And make sure you join my community. No charge. StephenGarofalo.com. StephenGarofalo.com. Put that down below. You can join for free. If you want to support us for $5 a month, you could do that as well. You'll get the podcast 1 to 3 days early. That's all I'll say about it. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Reason for Truth. I'm your host, Stephen Garofalo. This is your Reason for Truth for today.